One take, here we go. Hello, everybody. It's your boy, Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming here today. Let's talk about Xenoblade 3. We are on the verge of Wave 2 for the DLC dropping, and I want to talk about Xenoblade in the meantime. So I got quite a few videos down the pipeline. I'm cooking them up nice and crispy like, yeah, you feel me? But for today, I say we talk about one of the biggest parts of the story. Let's talk Mobius. Are they a good villain? Are they a bad villain? Where do I rate them among the echelons of Xenoblade villains? Let's talk about it, shall we? Okay, so honestly, my thoughts are kind of split. Here's my range. My range goes from among the best in the entire series, hell, among the best in gaming, for me. Like, there's some stellar freaking antagonists in this game. But then there's some of them just like, okay, like, I get what you're going for here, right? But I feel like this could have been executed better. So, let's start off with my favorites, N and M. So, besides sounding like a rapper, N and M are two of my favorite characters in all of Xenoblade. Triple S tier characters. They're right up there with Jin for me. Like, these characters, they're so freaking good. And how they're properly developed. And it's the show, right? Where you can lead the player on through mystery and intrigue for many, many hours, like they did with N and M, where we theorized and predicted that, hey, there's a connection to Noah and Mayo here. I was a bit slow on the uptake for M, but I had it down for Noah. I'm not gonna lie to you, I thought M the entire time was Nia from Xenoblade 2. I was a bit stupid when I was playing this game, so ignore that bit. But the intrigue, the investment, those questions that we raised throughout the game, they helped raise the stakes. They helped grab the player's interest. At least they grabbed mine. And I was really interested to see how their stories would unfold. And I didn't think they would unfold like they did at the end of Chapter 5. Because Chapter 5 is some of the best character development of any game that I've ever seen. Like, my only critique is that I would have appreciated there being some kind of gameplay break amongst all those cutscenes, because it's a long time with all those cutscenes. Have some level of interactivity there. Like, maybe have a little bit of a section, doesn't need to be long, right? Where you play as N, maybe through a few battles trying to protect M, and then at the very end, you have to force him to go down the path he did. You have to, like, put that input in. I just feel like maybe that could have been cool. But with what we got, that story is impeccable. It's immaculate. It's so beautifully written and so beautifully executed in terms of how they convey this information. How we see multiple iterations of N. They don't do the thing, right, where a lot of stories that try and say, hey, this character got broke by a cycle. Where they'll just show, like, one iteration and then just say, yeah, this repeated all the time. Be invested. No! They did not do that. First of all, we had all the development between Neo and Mio. Not Neo. I'm gonna make that mistake multiple times, just forgive me here. Noah and Mio. Present day, with Noah and Mio, we have all that development. So you already kind of know their dynamic. Then you go back in time to N and M. You see their fall. You see them meeting up multiple times, and you see them every time they finally get happiness. It's ripped from them. Sometimes violently, sometimes slowly. Sometimes it festers and decays. Sometimes it gives you a little bit of hope just to rip it away. And the way they did that and show this unfold over multiple iterations, I just think it was so beautifully written. Because this is the biggest thing for storytelling for me, is showing, not just telling. Telling can be good when used effectively, but you have to show the main important bits. You have to show the things that are meant to be impactful to the player. Just because when you show something happen, we see those raw emotions. We don't get them secondhand. We see them firsthand. We see those emotions. A picture paints 1,000 words. That's a very popular saying. But in a game, or in the way they did it with all these cutscenes, all those cutscenes have 1,000 pictures in them, and each picture has 1,000 words. That matters, because that conveys information effectively to the player. That conveys emotion, that conveys setup, intrigue, mystery. It it showcases development. It showcases the fall of the psyche of N. And the way they did that, because really, they only did that in that, like, hour and a half section. Because that's all the time they needed to really develop that character. And just say, let me just show you what he went through. And you will understand how he ended up this way. But you can also understand how M ended up this way. How she wanted to just get out of this cycle. She was more than willing to swap places with Mio. And, you know, have her last death. Because she was just tired of repeating this cycle, while that's all that N had. It showed two different ends of that spectrum of emotional trauma that those two characters went through. And I love how they developed those characters, how they showcased those characters, how the story of N and M relates to the story of Noah and Mio. So you use that development from those characters to further development of the main characters. I love it when a game is able to properly do that, because you not only develop multiple characters at the same time, but by developing those characters, you make me care about these other characters. Make me care about the protagonist. Because up to that point in time, I wasn't that big on Noah. Like, as a character, I thought he was a little bit bland compared to Shulk and Rex. But after that cutscene, I'm like, okay, he's up there now. Just watching N and Noah break simultaneously, like one after the other. They almost like swapped places when it came to emotional trauma. How first it was N trying to break Noah, and then it was Noah breaking N. That wasn't his intention. He was just show him that, hey, M is tired of this entire cycle. She just wants it to end. But that did break N. That entire story arc is so beautifully written, and there's a reason that it quickly became one of those flashpoints in the story for so many people. Like, yeah, it's sad, it's depressing, it's really emotionally draining on the player. But it's emotionally draining, it's sad for all the right reasons. It wasn't just a scene that was constructed to make the player feel sad, or to have some kind of emotional response. It was constructed to tell a story, and to tell a story in an effective manner. And by doing so in that effective manner, it betters the world, it betters the backstory of the world, it betters the development of future characters, it betters the development of Z, it betters the character development of the protagonists. It does all of these different things in one little story moment in the story. And that, to me, is why it's so beautifully written. Because it has such a far-reaching effect on the greater story as a whole, on the narrative that was being weaved here. And that, to me, is why N and M are up there in my echelon for great characters, alongside characters like Jin. I would say Jin, and then like half a step down is N, and then like another half step down is maybe M. Because let's be honest, most of that development was for N. But I like all three of those characters, right? But that was such great development. And to me, when you want to create an antagonist that is emotionally understandable, like, you may not agree with them, you may fundamentally disagree with them, but you can understand through the events that have transpired how they went from point A to point B. That, to me, is one great way to create an antagonist. Let's talk about the other great way. Z. Now, I don't rate Z as high as I do N and M. Not because I don't like the villain is the villain archetype, right? Where the bad guy's just really bad, irredeemable, and all that. I like him for the concept that he represents. But my issue with him comes through the execution of his character. Z suffers from what I call JRPG villain syndrome, or 343 Industries villain syndrome. If you know what I'm talking about just off of that, you know exactly what I'm talking about if you played the Halo 343 games. Where a lot of the time, throughout the main campaign, they really aren't all that present, all that much. They don't do much actively throughout the story. You don't really see them all that much outside of a few cutscenes where you're just sitting down. And then at the very end, you fight them, and that's kind of it. And I'm kind of alright with that, because he's meant to symbolize more of a concept where the true antagonist is this part of the human condition, and how we have to try and overcome this almost innate instinct for a lot of people to want to wallow in perpetuity, wallow in this perpetual present, this routine, because it may not be good for us, but it's what we know. A lot of times, I feel that people love having that routine, love having that sense of familiarity. Even if it's a negative thing for themselves, that familiarity breeds a sense of comfort. And despite the fact that this was a war-torn world where you only lived for 10 years, that was all they knew. So asking them to completely change, like the people at large, asking the people of Ionios to completely change their worldview, completely change their fundamental understanding of the world, that inherently breeds uncomfortableness, right? That makes sense. It's a change for the better. That's the entire point of the game. That you have to be willing to move into the future, even if for the moment it may not seem what you want. Like, right? Having all these characters together, that's what we want. But in order to go to the future that we truly want, the true future, we have to be willing to sacrifice the present happiness. We have to be willing to sacrifice this perpetual now to take those steps into the unknown. And Z represents all that anguish. He represents that sorrow, that fear, that trepidation. And he's a really good vessel for that. Because as a concept, you're not just tackling him with the character of Z. You're tackling him in all the other side stories. You're tackling him every time you liberate a colony and they ask you, hey, we don't know what to do anymore. You tackle him at the very beginning of the game, when the Kevers and the Agnes crew struggle to get along, because they don't know what to do. They're used to being enemies with one another, for no other reason than they were told to be enemies with one another. That's familiar to them. That was the present that they knew, that they were comfortable with. Comfortable is a slightly wrong word. It's not that they liked it, because comfortable kind of has this idea that you have a positive affiliation with it. It was just what they knew. It was what they understood. People like knowing things. People like being able to understand something. That fear of the unknown is a very present and almost umbrella theme that stretches throughout a large part of this game. And that's the stories that I really appreciate. When you have this umbrella theme, and all the other stories in the game have something to do with that umbrella theme, and they tackle different aspects of it. My only thing with Z, right, is that he was such a big part as a character, not just a concept. He was such a big part as a character for the development of N that I really wanted to see more of him throughout the story. And they kind of did that thing, that 343 Industries, which go back to that term I said with JRPG villain or 343 Industries villain, where the guy just kind of sat there in a room, said a bunch of stuff to underlings and had them go do it, and we didn't really see him till the very end, where he had his fight scene and then he was gone. We just kind of like immediately forgot about him. But like, I do believe that Z has benefit there. He's supposed to represent a concept, and the antagonists we were supposed to really care about as characters were N and M. Those were the antagonists that we were supposed to care about. But then in chapter 6 and 7, you really only have Z. And because he doesn't really show up, you don't get much dialogue with him. I just feel like Z as a character kind of falls a little bit flat to me. But Z as a concept, I really enjoy. I really enjoyed how they tackled that theme, how they explored it, and how they told those stories. I really like that. Now, let's talk about the rest of Mobius, because to me, I think they're pretty underwhelming. Most of the time, they just kind of feel like stereotypical villains. They're like, haha, I'm here to manipulate the colony to my advantage, or to my, desires. Haha, go get them, team! And then we, lay a smackdown on them with, the power of Thor's hammer Mjolnir within 3 minutes, and we absolutely, RKO them out of existence. But at the same time, the more I thought about this, how would I prefer that to have been handled? Because the only alternative that I can realistically see is that you just have some overarching villain controlling all these colonies, maybe a new character or something, like W, I don't know. And just every time when we liberate a colony, he just, skedaddles. I just feel like that would be underwhelming as well. So I feel like for the role, those, rank and file Mobius were pretty good. They don't, harm the story to me. It's just, whenever they're there, I kind of okay, I know how this is going to go. Right? We're not surprised by this. We know, hey, they're gonna turn evil. We're gonna have to beat them. Unless they're explicitly, a hero quest like Triton. hey, we kind of know how this is going to go. There is an exception with D and J. Love those two as characters. Those two as characters are freaking phenomenal, by the way. Like, this video is going a little bit long, but again, we see the trauma that those characters, well, not D, J, Yoren specifically, great character there. And I love how he's developed, how they showcase him with the rest of the main characters, how Lance is always trying to have these what-if questions in the back of his mind, tackling this idea about, what if I just saved him? What if I just handled this better? Really loved how they did J. And D is another good example of those unsympathetic villains that are just villains for villain's sake. Love D. Because, again, he was present in the story. He was involved with Uni's story. He was there at the very beginning when we became Mobius. Not Mobius, when we became Ouroboros. He had some witty one-liners. He was funny. When he was in the scene, it was a better scene. Because he grabbed the camera. He grabbed our attention. That was a good character to me. He was fun to be in the story. I love to hate him. And I love to beat him. And to me, that's how you can tell when a villain for villain's sake type of villain, that archetype is done well. When you love to hate them and you love to beat them. And when a villain that's meant to be sympathetic or understandable is good, you hate the fact that you have to beat them. Because you wish there was an alternative. And to me, Xenoblade 3 had both types of villains. And they did both types effectively. Absolutely loved the antagonist for this game. Though I do feel that there's probably some way they could have done the more rank-and-file Mobius. Like the rest of the numbers, that's not like X, Y, Z, or D and J. Like outside of those 5, I feel like there's something they could have done to make the rest of those Mobius just a little bit less underwhelming. Like I kind of understand they're supposed to be extensions of Z and that concept and just meant to be villains. And it's not so much about the characters of those Mobius, more so how those Mobius affected the colonies, so you get the development for the colonies. Like, I get that. I just feel like if you had a little bit of a more threatening villain associated with them, it would be a little bit better for me, just a little bit better executed. It might, like, resonate a little bit more. But I digress. Overall, I'm really satisfied with how Xenoblade 3 did the villains. They were a very unique twist for the series, and I feel that it was a risk doing Mobius, but I feel that the risk paid off multiple times over. So, thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. Leave a comment down below with your favorite antagonist/villain for Xenoblade 3. Are you an N stan like me, or are you a Z fan? Maybe you're an M fan. Maybe you're a D or a J fan. Maybe you like one of the regular rank-and-file Mobius, and you have a different perspective to me. And that's fine, because opinions at the end of the day are opinions. But I would love to hear your opinion. So leave it in the comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Read them and get some good discussion going. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.